My name is Emily Carter, and the day my husband placed divorce papers on our newborn daughter's blanket was the day I realized some people only love you when life is easy. I was 32 years old, exhausted, stitched together from an emergency C-section, and still wearing hospital socks when Michael Carter walked into our living room, carrying a leather briefcase instead of flowers. Rain tapped softly against the windows of our home outside Austin, Texas. One baby slept against my chest while the other cried weakly in the bassinet beside me. Michael didn't kiss me. He didn't ask how I felt. He simply dropped a stack of papers onto the blanket covering our daughters and said, "Sign these tonight." At first I genuinely thought I was hallucinating from exhaustion. "Michael," I whispered, my voice cracking instantly, "please don't do this right now." He adjusted the cuff of his navy suit without looking at me. I already signed my half. Standing behind him near the kitchen doorway was his mother, Patricia. Arms folded tightly, purse tucked beneath one elbow, watching the entire scene with detached irritation. "We've all had difficult seasons, Emily," she sighed dramatically. "Crying won't change reality. 3 days earlier I nearly died bringing our daughters into the world. 31 hours of labor, emergency surgery, premature twins in the NICU. And now my husband wanted a divorce before I could even walk upstairs without pain medication. I don't understand," I whispered. Michael finally looked at me then, but his eyes were cold in a way I had never seen before. "You haven't been happy in a long time." I almost laughed from disbelief. Happy? I had spent 9 months vomiting, swelling, bleeding, and praying our daughters survived a dangerous pregnancy while he stayed late at work and criticized me for being emotional. Of course, I wasn't smiling like a woman in a diaper commercial. Before I could answer, Patricia crossed her arms tighter. "My son deserves peace," she snapped. "This house has been miserable for months." The baby in the bassinet started crying harder. I winced while reaching for her because even that movement hurt after surgery. Michael didn't move. Not once. That was the moment something inside me truly cracked. Not when I saw the divorce papers. Not when Patricia insulted me. When the father of my children ignored the sound of his own daughter crying. A phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. Michael looked down immediately, and for the first time all morning, he smiled. Not a polite smile, a soft one, an intimate one. My stomach dropped instantly. "Is it her?" I asked quietly. Patricia rolled her eyes. "Oh, for heaven's sake." Michael slipped the phone into his pocket. "That's not your concern anymore." But I already knew. Leila Monroe, 30 years old, luxury lifestyle influencer, perfect blonde hair, designer handbags, thousands of followers documenting expensive dinners and rooftop cocktails. Michael started changing around the same time she started appearing in his comments online. At first it was late meetings, then business trips, then criticism. He hated my maternity clothes, complained about my exhaustion, told me pregnancy had changed my energy. One night during my 7th month, he looked at me across the bedroom and said something I never forgot. "You used to take care of yourself." I remember staring at the ceiling after he fell asleep, wondering how a man could resent the woman, risking her life to carry his children. Now I knew, because emotionally, he had already left long before he walked out physically. Michael checked his watch impatiently. "I need those signed." The room went completely silent except for the twins crying softly. I looked at the man I married at 26. The man who once danced barefoot with me in the kitchen, while old jazz music played through tiny apartment speakers. Gone. Or maybe he had never been fully real at all. My hands trembled violently while I signed the papers. Patricia sighed dramatically the entire time. Dragging this out is embarrassing. Embarrassing. Not heartbreaking. Not cruel. Embarrassing. When I finished signing, Michael grabbed the papers immediately. Relief flashed across his face so quickly it almost looked triumphant. Then he did something I will never forget for the rest of my life. He leaned down toward the twins. For one brief second, hope rushed through me. Maybe he was going to kiss them goodbye. Maybe somewhere deep inside him, their father still existed. Instead, he simply stared at them like strangers. Then he straightened his jacket and walked toward the door. "That's it," I whispered weakly. He paused without turning around. "I'll send someone for the rest of my things next week." Then he left, quietly, like abandoning his family was another calendar appointment. Patricia lingered several seconds afterward before muttering something that made my blood run cold. "You're still young," she said. "Maybe someday you'll find someone who actually wants this kind of life." She gestured vaguely toward me, toward the babies, toward motherhood itself. Then she walked out too. That night, while feeding one of the twins in the dark around midnight, I turned on the television mostly to escape the silence. And there they were, Michael and Leela at some downtown charity gala. She wore a silver gown worth more than our mortgage payment. The interviewer asked how they met. Leela smiled sweetly into the camera. Sometimes people finally meet the person they were actually meant to build a life with. Michael smiled beside her. No guilt, no hesitation. Then Leela added something that made my hands shake around the bottle. "Some women just aren't capable of keeping successful men happy." The audience laughed lightly. I turned the television off immediately. For a long time I sat there in silence, holding my daughters against my chest. Then slowly, I looked toward the hallway closet. Inside sat a dusty cardboard box I hadn't opened since my father died. My father spent 40 years as a local newspaper reporter in Texas. Before he died, he told me something I never forgot. "When life breaks your heart, tell the truth anyway." I pulled the box onto the floor. Inside were notebooks, cassette tapes, press badges, and old handwritten story drafts. One cassette was labeled "First Story That Ever Mattered." Curious, I played it. My father's voice filled the room instantly. Warm, steady, familiar enough to make my throat tighten. "Real journalism isn't about famous people," he said in the recording. "It's about ordinary people surviving ordinary heartbreak." Something shifted inside me while my daughters slept beside me. Before marrying Michael, I used to write constantly. Human interest stories, community interviews, articles about ordinary people surviving invisible pain. Then marriage happened, pregnancy happened, and somewhere along the way, I stopped sounding like myself. That night, after the twins finally fell asleep, I opened my old laptop and started writing again. At first it hurt. Everything hurt. My body, my pride, my heart. But the words came anyway. I wrote about a widower playing piano in nursing homes because loneliness sounded quieter. With music nearby. I wrote about a waitress working double shifts to afford insulin for her grandson. I wrote about ordinary people carrying invisible grief. And somehow writing about their resilience helped me survive my own. A week later, I emailed one piece to a tiny local radio station. I expected nothing. Instead, 2 days later, my phone rang during a diaper change. "Emily Carter?" An older man asked. "Yes, this is Robert Hayes from KXTR Community Radio. Are you still writing?" That single phone call changed everything. Robert had known my father for decades. The station barely paid anything. Tiny freelance checks, late-night editing work, weekend voiceovers. But it was mine. So while my daughters slept beside borrowed bassinets, I worked. I edited audio with one hand while warming bottles with the other. I interviewed veterans during nap schedules. I recorded voice segments at midnight wearing spit-up stained sweatshirts. It was exhausting, messy, beautiful. Meanwhile, Michael's life online looked perfect. Luxury vacations, rooftop dinners, engagement rumors with Leela. Eventually, I stopped checking because it hurt too much. Then one story changed everything. Robert assigned me a piece about elderly veterans facing eviction from a retirement complex outside Fort Worth. Nothing glamorous. Just frightened old men trying not to lose the last place they still called home. One widower showed me photographs of his late wife folded carefully inside his wallet. Another cried describing how he couldn't afford both medication and rent. When the story aired, donations flooded in nationwide. Businesses stepped forward. The housing complex survived. And suddenly people wanted to know who reported the story. 3 days later, Robert walked into the station grinning. "Looks like America likes you." Then he tossed an email onto my desk. "National Morning Live interview request." My stomach dropped. 6 months earlier, I had been sitting on a recliner bleeding through hospital bandages. While my husband abandoned me, now people wanted to hear my voice. And for the first time since Michael walked out, I realized my life might not be over after all.